Yesterday, we focused on former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton running for president and her impact in Texas, or at least Texas's impact on her. But the first Republican to announce since the biggest name in the Democratic field joined took advantage of an opportunity to launch a salvo in her direction. Florida's Marco Rubio became the third first-term senator to join the field on the GOP side. Born of Cuban parents, he's made headlines for talking about immigration reform. We'll discuss that with our Republican strategist in a moment and the impact it could have in Texas. Rubio also talked about tax reform, controlling spending, repealing Obamacare, creating a 21st century higher education system, and protecting families and life.
If we did these things, then our nation would be safer, our world more stable, and our people more prosperous. These are the things that we must do. But this election is not just about what laws we're going to pass. This election is a generational choice about what kind of country we will be. Now, just yesterday, a leader from yesterday began a campaign for president by promising to take us back to yesterday. Yesterday is over. And we're never going back. You see, we Americans are proud of our history, but our country has always been about the future. And before us now is the opportunity to author the greatest chapter yet in the amazing story of America. But we can't do that by going back to the leaders and ideas of the past. We must change the decisions we are making by changing the people who are making them.
Matt Mackowiak with the Potomac Strategy Group is a Republican strategist. He also led the campaign of Bill Flores when he first entered into Congress. Matt, I take from your tweets yesterday, you were pretty impressed with Mr. Rubio's statement.
Yeah, I mean, look, Marco Rubio is a very impressive guy. He's an outstanding speaker and messenger for the Republican Party. He's got a very compelling personal story as the son of Cuban immigrants. You know, grew up in a very working class family with a father who was a bartender and a mother who was a maid. I mean, his story is only possible in America, and I think that's a message that he conveyed very effectively at his announcement event yesterday in Miami.
He's a very different candidate, though, than Ted Cruz and Rand Paul. What are the differences that you see there?
Yeah, part of it is, you know, he doesn't have the rough edges someone like Ted Cruz has. You know, he's very conservative. I don't know if he's quite as conservative as Cruz, but he is a pretty conservative guy. Now, obviously, when it comes to immigration, he worked with Democrats to try to pass the Gang of Eight bill, and it passed the Senate, and ultimately he realized that was not the right approach. He sort of backed away from his own bill, which never became law because it never passed the House. But look, Rubio has appealed to all different sectors of the party. He is primarily known as being, you know, in favor of a muscular foreign policy. He's sort of a hawk, and his expertise really comes into play when it comes to foreign policy and national security. But he is 100% strong on social conservative issues. He has a very thoughtful tax reform proposal he's put out. He's really an ideas guy in the Republican Party. And
but on that immigration, though, Matt, back to the immigration point real quick. In Texas especially, the fact that he's kind of flip-flopped here and there in a state that is so critical probably in this Republican primary early enough along where there's going to be a lot of candidates in there. If he's still around, does that flip-flop hurt him on immigration?
It could. I mean, he's obviously moved, you know, from the middle to the right, so the base will appreciate that he's moved in their direction. But it's always going to be a matter of trust with the base, and the base just opposes amnesty no matter who's proposing it. And so, you know, that is something he's going to have to address on the campaign trail every single day from now on. But it's really the only issue where he has any major problems with the conservative base.
When it comes to who he is and his beliefs and his values, does he cut into the votes that another prominent Republican candidate is going to be getting? Where does he line up ideologically? Where does he take votes from?
I think the obvious answer to that is Jeb Bush. You know, they're both Florida Republicans. They're actually both from Miami. They have overlapping bases of support. Rubio is strength right now in the party is within the establishment wing of the party where Jeb is strongest. If Jeb were not running, which I think is what Rubio expected, he would have Florida united behind him, but he doesn't. He has a piece of the Florida Republican Party. So they really kind of cut into each other's support. If Jeb were to falter, Rubio could succeed, but I think he needs Jeb to falter to some extent to get that kind of support.
Are the fact that 3 first-term senators are the first 3 into this race, and we're just getting done with a first-term senator who became a 2-term president, does that speak at all to you in any way, shape, or form? Do you think there are going to be voters out there that are going to hesitate just simply because we have another first-term Senate group that is going into this?
There's no question it's an effective criticism of those 3 members, and they're going to hear those attacks from governors and from more experienced candidates. It's clear, though, that long service in the United States Senate is not necessarily a political advantage because you take thousands of votes, any handful of which you can be attacked for. So I think these 3 senators, number one, think they have a path to the nomination, but they also see that Obama served in the United States Senate 2 years and was able to be a national candidate and obviously be elected president. So they look at that example and they believe they can follow in his footsteps, but do so on the Republican side of the aisle.
Matt Mackowiak, actually on his way from Austin to Washington to look into a few more things on the Republican side and do his work. We appreciate your time and enjoy your trip to D.C. If you can make it out of there, we hope you make it back to Texas.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Thanks, Matt.